Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Mandy Morello, and I'm a student representative for UNICEF USA's student chapter at the University of Michigan. For World Health Day 2022, UNICEF-UM is conducting a week-long initiative to raise awareness about threats to childhood health and well-being and ways that we, as a global community, can overcome them. Today, I'm joined by Alicia Godsberg, Assistant Director of UNICEF Global Programs. Alicia has been with the Global Programs team at UNICEF USA since July 2016, focusing on various programs like WASH, climate, energy, and environment, and HIV/AIDS. Prior to working at UNICEF USA, Alicia served as the Executive Director of Peace Action New York State and was the Research Associate for the Strategic Security Program and UN Affairs at the Federation of American Scientists in Washington, D.C. Alicia has a master's degree in political science from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York, and she received her undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Michigan. Alicia, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here.
Before we begin our conversation, would you like to introduce yourself and speak more about your role within UNICEF Global Programs, including how you got your position?
Sure. Well, that was a really nice introduction you gave. So I'll just add a little bit to that. As you mentioned, my portfolio covers water, sanitation, and hygiene, but also climate, environment, and disaster risk reduction. I also supervise the UNICEF Knowledge Workstream at UNICEF USA, which is about training and capacity building for staff understanding about UNICEF programs. You said I've been at the organization for about 5.5 years, that's right, and I got my undergrad from U of M. I found out about the position at UNICEF USA through a friend who had a neighbor who works there, and they both encouraged me to apply. So like many things in life, it's kind of chance and kind of who you know. But it was a great opportunity that kind of intersected with my interests and my experience. So here I am all these years later.
Wonderful, that's great to hear. And from our research at Michigan, based off of global programs and the rest of the work that UNICEF USA does, this is such an integral program to the well-being of children and really epitomizes UNICEF's core values. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
So why don't we begin by going back to WASH and discussing UNICEF Unite's theme for this past March, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene. UNICEF-UM just concluded a period poverty initiative, so our followers do have a pretty good understanding of what WASH means and how integral potable water and hygiene is to childhood health. But with COVID, climate change, and humanitarian crises, WASH is even more pressing. What more can you tell us about this program and the role that it has taken in today's political, social, and economic climate?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, WASH is such an important area of work for UNICEF. And, you know, water is life. Without water, people can't survive. And young children especially are susceptible to diseases from poor quality WASH, and those can be life-threatening. Water is also a resource that can lead to migration and conflict. Without water to drink or for agriculture or animals, people can be forced to leave their homes. And with limited shared water resources available, conflict over who is able to use those resources and when can occur. So UNICEF addresses these issues by using water as a means for peace building across communities and supporting the safe and sustainable supply of water to everyone, especially the most marginalized. And in humanitarian crises, UNICEF is actually the international emergency cluster lead for WASH response, taking a responsibility for everything that has to do with WASH assistance and recovery, whether that's a sudden onset emergency like a flash flood or through a prolonged conflict like in Syria. With COVID-19, the world became very aware of the importance of hand washing with soap as a means of infection prevention and control. So UNICEF is continuing to support countries not only in building out the infrastructure needed to enable people to wash their hands with soap and water at home, but also engaging in important behavior change communication to redefine norms and shaping markets to ensure there's local, affordable, and consistent supply and demand for soap and water for hand washing at home, in schools, and healthcare facilities.
Thank you. That sounds like an insurmountable task, but also something that is really important, especially redefining infrastructure and maybe even implementing different types of policy or even policy suggestions. So thank you for that. So I'm sure WASH will also at some point be impacted by climate change or something that has to do with climate change. And UNICEF Unite's April theme is about the impact of climate change. And so climate change comes with a multitude of consequences, including but not limited to food insecurity, intensified natural disasters, droughts, rising sea levels, and heat waves. Beyond WASH, how has UNICEF altered its approach to humanitarian aid to be more equipped to deal with these changes?
Well, it's a great question, and one that UNICEF actually put a lot of thought into for their current strategic plan. UNICEF has a presence in over 190 countries and territories, and they like to say they're there before, during, and after emergencies, and that includes climate-related emergencies. UNICEF also has the world's largest humanitarian supply warehouse in Copenhagen, along with 7 regional hubs where supplies are pre-positioned. So emergency supplies like hygiene kits can reach people within 72 hours of the onset of any emergency. In the new strategic plan that launched at the beginning of this year, UNICEF addresses not only emergency response, but also their development work across all sectors like education, health, nutrition, by mainstreaming climate response across all the goal areas. So what this means is that all of UNICEF's work now has to take climate resilience into account, whether that's ensuring latrines are built outside of flood zones, or schools are constructed so that they're resistant to typhoons and cyclones, or more upstream considerations like ensuring governments prioritize funding for climate resilience in their national spending programs across every sector. A lot of that work can be categorized as disaster risk reduction, which is a proactive strategy aiming to reduce the vulnerability of children and their communities to the impacts of climate change.
Thank you. Do you think that, or to follow up, what do you think would be the overlap of humanitarian crises, maybe like what we're seeing in Ukraine, and the rise of climate change related disasters?
The overlap in terms of like humanitarian response?
Yes.
Okay, well, you know, as I mentioned before, there is an international emergency cluster system that UNICEF is a part of, that different UN agencies and some NGOs play specific parts in. So for example, UNHCR is the human rights agency, and they oversee refugees. And UNICEF also has a special responsibility for child protection within that space. So they all work together to ensure not only that there's no overlap in terms of response, but that they can most efficiently and quickly support people in emergencies. So whether it's a climate emergency or a conflict like Ukraine that's ongoing, or something like Yemen that's been going on for years and shows no sign of stopping, UNICEF is still in country, still working within the cluster system with other agencies and NGOs, and making sure that children in particular, but children and their families are protected and respected, and their rights are not threatened in any way.
I think the cluster system was a really great addition to this conversation, because I'm not sure that that's something most of us understand or know about. So I think that is going to be a really beneficial piece of information that we can use not only in the conversation during World Health Week, but as UNICEF-UM especially moves forward with different educational and advocacy events. Other than climate change, diseases like COVID are severe threats to children. UNICEF has reported that it's procured more than 2 billion doses of vaccines annually for immunization and outbreak responses in over 100 countries. And also since February of 2021, UNICEF has been working with COVAX, which is the COVID-19 Vaccines Global Access Program, to organize the international transport of COVID vaccines for people in developing countries. Can you speak to the importance of this particular responsibility and why the responsibility has fallen on an organization like UNICEF?
Yeah, absolutely. Ensuring people everywhere could receive doses of COVID-19 vaccines at the earliest available moment was the most urgent task confronting the entire world from the moment the pandemic started. UNICEF has a global presence and expertise in vaccine procurement, and that made it really the only organization that could deliver such a huge undertaking at scale. So UNICEF has the largest vaccine procurement, storage, shipping, cold chain, and supply network in the world. And before the pandemic, UNICEF was already reaching nearly half of the world's children under 5 with over 2 billion vaccines every year. So UNICEF not only has that power, but also has the expertise and people in country to prepare countries and communities to receive and distribute vaccines, both from the supply and the demand side. So for all these reasons, UNICEF was asked to play the strategic role and lead the efforts to procure and supply COVID-19 vaccines across low and middle income countries to help close the equity gap for these vaccines in the world's largest and fastest ever vaccine rollout. And that is through what we call Act A, or the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, of which COVAX, which you mentioned, is a part. Act A is the global collaboration to accelerate the development, production, and equitable access to COVID-19 tests, treatments, and vaccines. So not only the COVAX, like the vaccine pillar, but also tests and treatment. And all of that is supported by a fourth pillar, which is the strong and strengthening health systems. So that way, UNICEF is delivered. So by the end of January 2022, UNICEF delivered almost 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines to 109 countries. They also shipped more than 418 million surgical masks and more than 41,000 oxygen concentrators in support of 144 countries as they respond to the pandemic.
Wow, that is an incredible responsibility and a job of such great magnitude, but obviously it's important and needed in today's global climate. So to build off of that, this past January, a private company announced in partnership with another private company and UNICEF that it will allocate 3 million doses of an oral antiviral COVID-19 medication to low and middle income countries. Can you discuss what partnerships like this and within the private sector in general entail and what they mean for ensuring UNICEF's mission is maintained, which is no children being left behind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. UNICEF needs the partnership of the private sector to achieve results for children at scale. So businesses in particular, they support UNICEF through a couple of different ways. They give cash donations, but other important ways such as through advocacy around child's rights, laws, and norms, and promoting their own internal child's rights and equity agenda in their company practices, and through their core business products and assets. Engaging in partnerships to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals is actually one of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's SDG 17. So you can see how integral partnership is to UNICEF's work and all the UN families' work so that they can achieve the SDGs by 2030. The private sector doesn't just include businesses though, it's individuals like you and me, it's faith-based and other membership organizations and foundations. And UNICEF relies on all these actors for funds, for education with the public, and for advocacy with governments. All the private sector partners are really critical for UNICEF's mission to deliver for every child.
So my peers and I are going to be entering a world further defined by this pandemic and by climate change, amongst a host of other things. And it's imperative that we understand all of their consequences and all of the different moving parts as we've been discussing today. Sometimes it's hard to remain optimistic. What can you tell our viewers about progress, success, and the role that we can play as individuals in assisting your mission?
That's a great question. First of all, the fact that you're watching this video, that you're already engaged with UNICEF Unite on campus is amazing. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your support. It's so important to keep engaged, as you mentioned. Our world is more interconnected than ever. You know, we can be anywhere around the world whenever we want, can hop on a plane. We can connect with people, you know, through virtual spaces anywhere around the world. And we need to work together to ensure a future where every child can survive and thrive. Before COVID-19, many of the indicators for child well-being were actually moving in the right direction. Progress was being made. There were gains in education indicators, child health, protection, and other areas. But now we really have to redouble our efforts to ensure these gains are not lost because of the lockdowns of the past 2 years. We need to pick up from those successes and move forward better than before. And it is hard to remain optimistic sometimes. I mean, climate change, conflict, poverty, these are huge issues. But remaining disheartened is not an option. Millions of children depend on our support and advocacy for their futures. So what can you do? You can stay involved with UNICEF as you move on from college. You can make sure you're doing everything you can in your own life to be sustainable and green, and insist on sustainability in as many aspects of your life as you can. You can keep space open for the voices of children and adolescents in the areas that impact them, and you can just stay connected to the world around you.
At UNICEF-UM, we know that one of the best ways to enact change, two of the best ways to enact change really, is education and its advocacy. So events like these help us understand our role in safeguarding children's rights and teaching others how to do the same, but also with people like you taking the time to speak with us as students and as members of different communities is incredibly valuable. And your insight and expertise is something that not many people get access to. So we hope that not only was everyone able to learn something today, but that we hope to continue this partnership in the future. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And for more about this topic, UNICEF's work, Alicia's work, you can go to our Instagram or our website shown below. And to learn more about UNICEF's global programs, the strategic partnerships, the sustainable development goals, the cluster groups, and much more, you can also see the link below. And hopefully we will see you all back at our virtual panel this Thursday, April 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will be discussing the impact of climate change on childhood well-being with two professors from the University of Michigan. Thank you.